Welcome back to the closing session of Green Week 2020. My head's spinning. It's been an amazing 3 days with lots of panel discussions, dozens of them, in fact. And now we're sort of taking off everything together now and looking ahead on the road to Kunming. That is the city in China where there's going to be the Biodiversity Summit next year. A very important crunch time for biodiversity, for humanity even. And this is what we're going to be talking about during this next hour and a half. What is the takeaway on Green Week 2020? What do we take with us from this and apply it for the Green Deal, for an eventual biodiversity agreement in Kunming? These panels included farming, forests, financing, water, soil, protected areas, fighting diseases and air pollution. We had a State of Nature report raising the alarm. We had partner events. We had the Life Awards. We had a lot of things going on, and all this we want to put together and think about in toto. What does this mean for us as we go forward? We had media briefings on investment, the state of the Mediterranean, another clarion call to action. And we're looking toward major conferences next year, including that summit and others as well, hoping there could be, as some say, a Paris-style accord on biodiversity. Technical remarks, let me give you just a couple. If you don't know them already, you can send your questions via the Meet You platform. It's pretty clear, but you can ask any questions if you want. The hashtag Green Week, hashtag Green Deal. Keep us trending with those hashtags. Very important. Now, with no further ado, let me move on to Florika Fink-Hooijer. Welcome, Florika. You are the Director General of DG Environment of the European Commission. And I hope I didn't steal too much thunder, but I think you're going to give us a bit more of the takeaway. What's important for all of us to remember from this, Florika?
Thank you, Chris. Basically, you already said it. This has been quite an exciting week for us and very rich debates. And I hope you all have learned as much as we did from not only the State of Nature report, which actually is alarming. It's not a good state, but it gives us and instills in us the sense of urgency, but also from the very insightful and very intense discussions. This is exactly the elements that we needed in order to prepare us for the road to Kunming, for the COP15. Now, I hope also it has energized you and also has given you not only the sense of urgency, but also you saw that there's opportunity to act and that there is hope, and we now have to bank on that. We clearly have a high responsibility, and some of the issues we heard perhaps require a little bit of pausing and a little bit of extra highlighting. The first one I would like to mention is the Strategic Research and Innovation agenda of the Biodiversity Partnership. Now, I know this sounds very technical, but it actually is not, because it is having a real transformative potential. And it will help us, this partnership, to really reach out and integrate the biodiversity into different disciplines, but also research areas. And of course, it will be a key support for the Biodiversity Knowledge Center, which also we have launched together with the GIC and the EEA this week. And here I would like to really quote now our colleague Hans Bonnings from the EEA, because he said quite wisely, Europe is a continent that makes political decisions based on science. And I think this should be a comfort for our citizen to know that. Now, the second feature I would briefly like to highlight is the value of the LIFE program. We had the LIFE Awards, but I think it is also important for you to remember that it is actually a very, very small fund. It's just 1% of the full EU budget. But over the last 28 years of its existence, we have spent 3 billion, but okay, still, it has helped to hold the decline of 649 species. And this is a success in itself. But also the LIFE program has been really decisive for us for setting up and mapping Natura 2000 as a network. And I think through that, through LIFE and through the Natura 2000 network, we also reached more citizen and more the local level. And I think that's where the grassroots comes up and which gives us the power to act. Now, I think it is now time to rethink our relationship with nature. That's absolutely clear. We have to make the right decisions. We have to rebuild, but we also have to put really climate and nature at the heart of the post-pandemic recovery. Protecting and restoring is one of the greatest long-term investments that we should make. And it is not just for us, it is for the future societies to come. What we have heard are all inputs, as I said, and milestones on the path to Kunming and to this Biodiversity Summit, which takes place in 2021. We hope that the world leaders will there join forces to really reverse nature loss and put nature first. Preserving and restoring our biodiversity is not just a European issue. It is actually, as Chris has said it is a planetary issue. It's a humanity issue. Now, Europe, however, has to show leadership. It has to demonstrate that it is able to walk the talk. But we can't do it alone. We really have to work with everybody in Europe, but also the other nations. And this is what this closing session is all about. It's how to prepare the road to Kunming. And actually, there should be many roads behind it as well. But before handing over, I would like to use this occasion also to say thank you to the many, many, many people who have made this virtual event happening. And be it on the content side, be it on the logistics side, all those who you don't see, but who are here with us and working behind the scenes. Now, before the panel is starting, I think we would like to hear also a word from our president, Ursula von der Leyen, and I give it back to Chris. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Florika. Thank you very much. And with me, of course, is Virginijus Sinkevičius of the Environment Ministry Commissioner. Thank you very much as well for joining us. And before we do our Q&A and with the rest of the panel and get as many questions from the viewers and listeners, let's hear from Ursula von der Leyen. When she did announce the Green Deal a few months ago, she called it the man in the moon moment. Let's hear from her.
Dear Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, dear Inga, dear Commissioners, dear Jutta and Virginijus, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. First of all, congratulations to the organizers of the 2020 European Green Week for a very successful edition. You have built a fantastic program, and I would like to thank everyone who has been involved. It makes the closing of this year's Green Week the opening of a new chapter. This European Green Week takes place as we are paving the way to Kunming. We need and we want a successful outcome of the global biodiversity negotiations. And you know that until not so long ago, biodiversity loss was discussed by a minority of devoted conservationists. Today, we all understand it is a very serious subject for everyone. Young people and students have understood. Biodiversity is at the heart of their future and the future of our planet. And the most active ones are mobilizing and are rallying the other generations. Active are mayors and local politicians, because biodiversity concerns every village and every city. And the most active ones are already hiring biodiversity officers. They want to make sure that we have green urban spaces, from parks and gardens to green roofs or urban farms. And this provides benefits for people and a refuge for nature. Active are also farmers and producers, because biodiversity affects every step. from our fields to our food. And the most advanced ones have already embraced it. They deploy precision agriculture, organic farming, or low-intensive permanent grasslands. And by doing so, they help us bring nature back and preserve biodiversity. Active are also business people and leaders, because biodiversity has a huge potential in terms of jobs, in terms of opportunities for our economy and for the society as a whole. And here too, the most active ones have already invested time, energy and money in this promising field. They know that restoration can lead to a significant creation of employment in sectors such as construction or landscaping work. And natural capital investment, including restoration of carbon-rich habitats and climate-friendly agriculture, is among the 5 most important fiscal recovery policies. So they have understood that there is no choice between nature on the one hand and the economy on the other. What is good for nature is good for the economy. Yes, we are living a very special moment, and your work and your engagement is central to that. Ladies and gentlemen, climate change and biodiversity loss are happening before our eyes. They amplify each other, and the need to act has never been clearer. And that is what is driving me as President of the European Commission. That is why we presented the European Green Deal last December after just 11 days in office. The European Green Deal is our vision and roadmap to making Europe the first climate-neutral continent by 2050. In March, we proposed the first ever climate law, and then the pandemic hit. Now, should we stop our course because of the pandemic? Of course not. To the contrary. This is why we also presented our EU Biodiversity Strategy for 2030 in May. It will scale up our work on this. Let me take an example. For example, protection of nature. If we act decisively, we can make a difference. The Iberian lynx, for example. Thanks to a series of projects supported by EU Life, one of the most threatened animals in Europe is recovering. There were only 100 Iberian lynx alive 20 years ago. Well, today we have more than 600 of them again. When we give a chance to nature, see what positive return we get. Let me take another example with nature restoration. By restoring floodplains, peatlands, and other carbon-rich habitats, we can increase our carbon sinks as well as bring back biodiversity. So there is a clear triple win at stake here. Win for the climate, win for biodiversity, and win for jobs. For example, the restoration of damaged coastal habitats would create jobs in coastal safety, marine and terrestrial ecology, hydrology, geochemistry, engineering, governance and maintenance, you name it. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are calling on all to join our action to halt biodiversity loss. You are numerous today, coming from all parts of Europe. Public and private sectors, small villages and the big cities, the multinationals, the small and medium enterprises, the startups. And there are more and more allies in the world. Development and humanitarian organizations, companies and cities, youth and faith organizations, and of course all countries and regions around the world who want to address biodiversity loss. It is at events like this Green Week that one feels the energy, that one gets the resolve to transform our economy and society. We are teaming up. We are providing leadership to help us agree on a new global biodiversity framework in Kunming next year. Global rules that are clear, measurable, that allow us to hold each other accountable. Let us act, each of us, with no delay, and you can count on my commitment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam von der Leyen. Let's go quickly to Virginijus, Sinkevičius, the Environment Minister, and we're going to go on to the other panelists, do a round of questions. We already have questions coming in from the viewers, so let's get to them as quickly as you can. But Virginijus, what energy did you feel this week? And you've been on a number of these panels.
I think energy can be similar felt from the president's speech, no? Very powerful speech, very inspiring speech. And of course, seeing president's support, seeing young people advocating, seeing huge engagement of scientists, NGOs, business sector, it is really motivating and a powerful force which I think drives us forward onto what we already started. And I'm truly happy that even so that we have this strange setting where we cannot meet all of us, you know, together in one room for the whole week and etc. Most of those meetings took place online. We're still actually going ahead. And the moment this pandemic will be behind us, I'm happy that we're not going to be starting from the status quo, which was, you know, a year ago. We have a biodiversity strategy in place. We have a chemical strategy in place. We have circular economy action plan. And the most importantly, we have a solid foundation, the Green Deal, which unites all this effort together. So I think the spirits are high, energy is good, and it drives us forward, even so during those uneasy times like the ones we're living at the moment.
And now this being the theme of our closing session on the road to Kunming, China, where there will be the Biodiversity Summit, you will go there with all those things you just mentioned in your pocket. And you will try to get the rest of the world on board to get some kind of an agreement there at that Biodiversity Summit. What are the EU's ambitions going there?
Absolutely, it's, you know, the highest level of ambition because clearly that's the agreement, and then action, of course, that's what the planet, humanity, and of course the nature needs. And in a nutshell, of course, we need first of all a global plan.
Yes.
That puts nature on a path to recovery by 2030, that holds the biodiversity loss, and that way we lay the ground for our 2050 goal. By then we need to ensure that all ecosystems are healthy, and that we have put a stop to all avoidable human-induced extinctions. But having a plan, of course, is not enough. We have to lead by example. And that's probably the most important. And we are doing that with our own biodiversity strategy, which was adopted in May, which is filled with ambitious commitments here in the EU. Ambitious, but yet achievable. We will need to see a number of components in the coming framework, and all of them matter. There is nothing that you can exclude and try to reach the goal. First of all, of course, it needs measurable targets, because usually what is measured is achieved. So measurable targets up until 2030, addressing all the main drivers of biodiversity loss. If you are in a boat that is, you know, that's leaking, you need to plug all the holes. You can't leave a few of them and expect to escape. No. So each of these pressures needs to be properly addressed. Secondly, of course, we need a strong mechanism for monitoring and reviewing, so we track the progress in a dynamic and transparent manner.
So the policy can evolve if it has to, right? To
Absolutely.
adapt.
So not only that the politicians or services who work, feeling engaged, but also society. Yeah. Those wonderful young people who were speaking in the session before, so that they see if we are right, on track or not. And usually the public pressure is a powerful tool to push for a change. So that way we can allow, for a periodic scientific reviews of our progress, and we can step up the efforts where it's needs, maybe some shifts, changes, because as you see, things change quite fast, and you need to adjust. And thirdly, probably it is also important to mention it needs a limited set of intuitive headline indicators, so it's easy to follow. This is another area where EU, I think, for sure can make a big contribution, because we are working on something very similar to track progress towards our own targets. So our learnings for sure can feed into the global process, not only feed, but I think be the solid base of it. This part needs to be, of course, worked out very carefully, because accountability and transparency will be essential for global buy-in into the framework. And I truly expect that we are not the only ones seeing what's going on and how fast nature is declining, that we are going to have, all major partners on board, especially the host country, China.
Now, you can ask the rest of the world to do things, but you need to lead by example, don't you? How do you do that?
That's a very good question. Thank you very much. And probably that was our motto from the very beginning. When I spoke about the biodiversity strategy for 2030, I always said that if we want a truly ambitious agreement in Kunming, we need to have ambitious strategy ourselves, and we need to start implementing it to show that we are on track, we are serious about it. Yeah. So Europe is pushing biodiversity right to the top of the political agenda, first of all, and making the global, of course, framework part of its external policies. As it's been discussed, you can't achieve progress on climate or biodiversity without having it horizontal across all the policy areas. So for biodiversity in marine areas beyond national jurisdictions, we will use all of our diplomatic means to push for an international agreement protecting the high seas. We will step up the fight against illegal, unregulated and unreported fishing. Mm-hmm. I'll be personally campaigning hard for marine protected areas in the Antarctic, which should end up as the largest protected area anywhere in the world. And
you talked about that a bit during your Our Baltic event.
Absolutely, and I still believe that we can achieve it, even if it's very hard to meet, partners from countries outside the EU because of the pandemic. But I truly believe that that would be one of the greatest gifts we could deliver for future generations, saving the Antarctica and protecting it properly, and showing that, even so we have differences, we have different approaches around the regions of the world, but we all agree that saving Antarctica, also Arctic, because what happens there basically affects all of us, and we are all citizens of Antarctica or Arctic, whichever you pick. So of course we want to crack down on illegal wildlife trafficking, tighten the rules on the ivory trade, and ensure that the full enforcement of biodiversity provisions are in place in all trade agreements. As we have said several times this week, we are already working on measures to avoid products associated with deforestation and forest degradations from reaching the EU market. I think we have made in past years a terrific progress on really looking at the labor, at human rights, where we speak about the production. Now it's time to also address a nature problems. What are the real costs, and take into account the natural costs of one or the other production, which has been neglected for many years.
Yeah, maybe, I mean, trade agreements did include some sort of environmental aspects, but I guess you want to amplify that in those agreements.
Trade agreements, I think it's a great tool for us to export not only our goods and services, but also our values. And one of those values is, of course, our care for nature. One of our grand strategies is the Green Deal, and it has to be embedded also in our trade agreements. So, moving a little bit now, if we speak about trade, of course, development cooperation here is critical.
Yes.
And we know we are asking a lot, and we will be there to support the efforts. The EU keeps up the work and working with its partners, and will step up support in this area after 2020, not only, you know, by asking for a higher standards from countries outside the EU, but also supporting them in development.
And you can't do this all alone. You got to have the private sector on board. How do you do that?
Absolutely. I think stakeholders' engagement is crucial.
Because and that's involved in the trade as well. They have, you know, the trade practice.
Absolutely.
But anyway,
And I think, you know, all our initiatives from the very beginning is very carefully crafted. I can give you an example of climate law, where from when it was announced 6-7 months ago, there was huge pressure to really put a number of how much, what is the percentage that EU is going to decrease the output of CO2 by 2030. And we've done it only after careful impact assessment, after you know, looking how it's going to affect the business, how it's going to affect nature, how it's going to affect society. Of course, after stakeholders consultation. So this is the approach we are taking, because this change has to be inclusive and it has to be just, not leaving anyone behind.
the change has to be in the boardrooms, right? It has to be in the boardrooms.
So now coming to your question on business. To be honest, I don't think so. This will be very difficult, because already so many companies already understand that this is what, first of all, citizens want.
Consumers, people
Absolutely.
who buy their stuff.
That means exactly.
Right.
Consumers want it as well. And this is the change in social climate is already there. And I remember myself, probably December, being in Berlin, in Germany, meeting the top CEOs during the dinner. And of course, speaking about the Green Deal. At that time, a new initiative by a new commission, just, I think it was, maybe the Green Deal was only 3 days adopted. So, and in that room, I would say that there were maybe 1.5 negative opinion in total, and everyone else was rather supportive, asking for clearance, asking for push, asking for not looking behind and really going ahead. So that would be the policy which they could follow. And I think clearly the change are still needed in boardrooms, as you said. And that's why we encouraging companies to assess and report not just their impact on biodiversity, but on how much they depend on natural capital as well. Those natural capital costs, which I mentioned to you before, which were ignored for so many years, taking sort of everything for nature as granted, but it's not. And finally, we are getting to it that it is not granted, and of course we have to treat it with certain respect and sustainability standards. And we, of course, are doing what we can to make that easier for companies, improving environmental accounting practices to make first of all, the measurements easier. Then there is a new EU legislation on sustainable financing. It's a kind of eco-label. Everyone knows eco-label very well, usually when you buy
on
something.
products, but now you want to put it on financial products. I mean,
Exactly,
now
exactly.
You used to be Minister of Economy in Lithuania.
Yes.
How feasible do you think that is?
Oh, absolutely. I think everyone is looking now, allowing banks and investors to recognize what is green investment. This is what the investors want. If you look, there is a huge shift already into green investments. But when you speak with funds, with investors, what they being usually asked from the customers, so that their money would be put on green investments, but they have to make sure that it's really green without the greenwashing. And this is what we are going to ensure, that it will help them, direct available capital in the right direction, knowing that it is a approved, a sustainable solution. And I think we already can see multiple examples. There are front runners as well as good examples to follow, like business pledge launched by Business for Nature before the UN Biodiversity Summit last month. And this is kind of action we really need. In efforts like that, business can count on our full support, on clearance, on incentives to them to follow that path. And I think now, like never before, we have a unique chances, and businesses have a unique chances to learn from COVID-19, because if COVID seems like a huge crisis, which, me being a Minister of Economy and have certain degree in that, never imagining that economy can be shut down. It can be slowed down, but can it be shut down? Yes, now we know that it can. And it's just, it's a virus we're speaking about, but how about the big picture? How about the climate change and biodiversity loss? What impact it's going to have on businesses and on things which were, for many years by us was taken as granted, and nobody really believed that we're not going to be able to take flights because there will be just no flights.
Yeah, exactly. We're having to adapt very, very quickly. And why don't we turn to some of the other panelists at this point, and please do keep those watching keep sending in your questions. I'm keeping track of them. We'll get to them, but we want to do a quick round of questioning to the rest of the panel. Can I speak to Inger Andersen? Inger, are you connected? Inger, I can see you. The screen is a bit frozen. Can you hear me, Inger?
Yes, I am.
Wonderful. You're looking great. Okay.
Yes.
Executive Director of UNEP, the United Nations Environment Program.
Nice to see you.
Welcome. And I have to note that we only have you for about a half an hour, so we got to make this count. And why is it so difficult to get political leaders to take biodiversity loss seriously when natural capital, as we had been just discussing, natural capital plays such a fundamental role in their lives, in all our lives? Can you answer that?
Sound just disappeared.
Should I ask the question again? Can you hear me?
Well, I only heard the first part of the question.
Okay. Let me ask you again.
I think
Let me ask you again. Hang on. Why is it so difficult?
Go for it, yes.
Why is it so difficult to get political leaders to play ball on this biodiversity crisis? Why don't they cooperate and try to, are you hoping to see them cooperate next year at Kunming? Because natural capital plays such a vital role. That's 50% of our GDP depends on nature, doesn't it?
Sure, but we haven't valued it. So what we've done is that we tax the goods, we don't tax the bads. So destroying nature doesn't cost anyone anything, except it costs me my future and our children's future. The point here being that we need to understand the value that nature plays in our society. And then we need to understand what are those drivers of loss, the drivers of loss of biodiversity. And those drivers, and we heard the Commission referring to them, are the changes in sea and land use, which means overfishing, which means pollution, which means not good enough regulatory settings on pollution. Those drivers are overfishing and exploitation, which means subsidies to fisheries, which means unregulated fisheries. Those drivers are climate change, which means we need to adhere to Paris, which means we need to reduce CO2. Those drivers are pollution, which means we need to regulate and reduce pollution. And they are invasive alien species. So it's not enough to put a fence around nature and say that we are done. It is about fundamental drivers, and that involves an all of society engagement. That means that you and I need to understand that value and make those shifts in the climate system, in the food system, and in how we consume and produce. And it will take, as we heard from the Commissioner, an all of society approach. It's not just that we need to have politicians agree. We need business aligned. And a big part of this is agriculture. And in the EU, we need to see alignment between the agricultural policy on the one hand, which needs to be made nature positive and subsidize the right things that are nature positive, and environment on the other. So we had an agreement in 2010 that was ambitious, that had targets, but it didn't take root. Why? Because we didn't have those alignments with the rest of society. Environment ministers agreed on ambition, but we need to ensure that it is all of society. And that's where I feel optimistic right now, because when we look at the European Green Deal, when we look at the European Biodiversity Plan, we can see that there is at least an attempt to ensure a degree of alignment. It will mean, however, a discussion of fishing subsidies. That has to have a global agreement. It will mean, however, a discussion of the common agricultural policy. It will mean, however, that we make farmers not the enemy, but the friends of biodiversity by subsidizing the right things so that they can be part of the solution. And then all the other things, protected areas, illegal trade, labeling at the global level, so that we do not encourage, and that consumers know if they're buying, as we heard from the Commissioner, deforestation-free products.
So Inger,
or
can I ask you, Inger?
How much chemical input was used in the production of the product they're buying.
Indeed, Inger, you tick down a number of things that need to be done, but what are two short-term priorities, two, maybe we can call them quick wins, to show us that we're starting to get on track? Did you catch that one?
Well, right now, it is about, we are borrowing, yes, more or less. I think they cut your sound before you have a chance to finish your sentence.
Priorities,
but more or less.
Okay.
Right now, we are putting this unprecedented amount of money, into the economy. Never before have we taken out of the taxpayers' pockets these resources and put it into the private sector. Now, that's a very good thing. We're putting, first of all, into the health sector. We're putting it into people's pockets who are otherwise unemployed, into companies, so they do not have to lay off staff. But let's understand that this money was not sitting in the treasuries of nation states. This money is borrowed from tomorrow. This money is borrowed from the next generation. Indeed. So the first thing you ask about priority is to be sure. If we're borrowing from the next generation, we surely need to make sure that not only are we handing that next generation a sustainable planet, we are not going to hand them, on the one hand, a broken planet, as well as a whole bunch of debt for our foolishness. So we need to make sure, first of all, that there are green strings attached to the public borrowing, to the stimulus packages. And those have to be on nature-based solutions, on sustainable agriculture, on renewable energy, on reduced footprint, on conservation on green energy, green infrastructure cities. So that's a very, I would say, before anything else, you cannot be spending tomorrow's taxpayers' debt and not make it green. So that, I would say, right now is the biggest priority of all. And then we need to follow through, second priority.
Okay.
Act on the political will that exists right now. There are people now have understood, I think, as we also heard Commissioner reflect, and obviously the President, Ursula von der Leyen, that people have understood that nature is not sort of on the nice to have list. It's essential. It regulates our weather. It ensures that harvest will follow harvest. It provides us the very air we breathe and the food we eat. And this is no small matter. So having the lungs of the world be in existence, the tropical forests, means something. So back to what we buy, understanding that soy, biofuels, the forestry that we have, it is not just what we do in Europe for the Europeans to worry about. It is a footprint that they have on the whole world for the things that they buy. So having a much greater awareness around that. These are the two issues that right now we need to prioritize. But first and foremost, the stimulus packages. They have to be green.
That's interesting. That's kind of related to what Virginijus was saying about trade policy, about how the European Union wants to influence abroad, beyond its borders. Thanks, Inger. Let's move on to, can we move on to Jochen Flasbaut of the German Environment Ministry, State Secretary. Jochen, grüße Sie. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Hello. So happy to be with you here.
Yeah, super, great. See and hear you loud and clear. What can EU national governments do to support the Green Deal? And of course, also keeping in mind that Germany still has the rotating EU presidency till the end of the year.
Yes, not only still has EU presidency, we are in the highest important phase of this presidency. We are working hard and Chris, let me say, allow me to say just an introductory word that how important it is and how important it is to have it here at the Green Week to prepare for Kunming. The loss of biodiversity is still unprecedented. And you know what is shocking is when we are talking among politicians about the state of biodiversity, I hear exactly the same sentences as 10 years and more before. So we have 1 decade behind us, and Germany was proud to lead the CBD presidency to Aichi Nagoya, where we adopted the Aichi Nagoya targets. And in a way, it is absolutely disappointing and irresponsible what we did over the time that in this decade nothing changed substantively. And this is not because the targets were wrong. And the Commissioner said, and I agree, we need clear, measurable targets on global scale as well as in Europe. That all was put in place already with the Aichi Nagoya targets. The only missing thing was, and that is why we failed, in my view, the only missing thing is the implementation tools. We didn't have the implementation tools that we luckily have in the climate regime. And I really hope that we will prepare also in the European Union, and we will work hard on that for coming next year to avoid this mistake again, to have wonderful targets, measurable as well, but with a huge gap of instruments. And now, sorry for I didn't want to escape your question. Right. I think the Green Deal, as presented again by the President here at the beginning of this Green Week, and also by Commissioner Virginijus, Sinkevičius, is something wonderful. It's really something that can make us proud in Europe. It's our concept how to organize wealth in our region, in our European Union. It's something very specific, and it can create a new identity for our continent. That's great, that's brilliant. What can member states do? Simply support it. I mean, we are co-legislator. I see our good friend Pascal, he's another co-legislator. And member states have to behave accordingly in the councils, where we do the policy setting, where we have to react on the proposals of the Commission. And so we are working hard on that. I want to finalize my answer to your first question is, looking at protected areas and our wonderful network, Natura 2000 in Europe, this would not happen without the European level. It would not have come from the national level for sure. But even more important is the absolutely unsustainable land use and forestry and fisheries we have around the world, but also still in Europe. And in my assessment, I saw the results of the Agriculture Council. It has not reached the level of ambition we have seen within the Commission with the Green Deal. We have to work more on it, because if we don't solve the unsustainability of the land use sector, we will not be able to protect our biodiversity.
So let me ask you, Jochen, and keep in mind, everybody, about hashtag Green Deal, hashtag EU Green Deal, hashtag EU Green Week. You made reference to what sounds to me like a lost decade. We've had a lost decade. How much faith do you have that we can catch up from that lost decade in terms of addressing biodiversity, in terms of going toward that climate neutrality that we want to hit by mid-century?
Yes, it's not a kind of options that we have. We need to be successful. And yes, we have seen, to relativate my statement a bit, we have seen some progress in some areas. We have seen countries like, look at Costa Rica, where a lot has been done, so it's doable. We have the good examples. But looking at the global scale and also looking into Europe, we have to do much more. That is, as I said, we have to get the land use, fisheries and forestry sector on track. This is a battlefield for biodiversity in a way. If we lose it, then we lose biodiversity. We cannot do everything in national parks and highly protected areas. This is it's a kind of jewelries we want and need to have, but without getting sustainable use in the broad of all the sectors, we will not be successful.
Okay, so we've talked to now the Commission level. Jochen, we've talked to you on the national level. So that's Commission, that's Council. Now let's talk to the European Parliament level. Pascal Confin, can you hear me? Bonjour.
Bonjour, can you hear me?
Yes, je vous entends très bien. You are the chair of the Environment Committee in the European Parliament, and in fact it was, if I understand correctly, the Parliament declared a state of emergency, a climate emergency, on your initiative as chairman of the Envy Committee. How vital is the Parliament's role in accomplishing the Green Deal?
Good afternoon to all, and good afternoon to the panelists. Well, the Parliament is vital, as you said, because as Johan said, we are the co-legislators in Europe. So everything related to the Green Deal, whether we talk about the climate law or the common agricultural policy or the fight against imported deforestation and so on and so on and so on, it is through legislations that we vote or not in the Parliament, and then we finally negotiate it with the Council. And that's why the Parliament is key, and I try to drive ambition upwards within the House. And you mentioned the climate emergency resolution. It was last year, it was December last year. But since we also voted our version of the climate law, it was around a month ago, and we managed to have a majority to support the highest level of ambition ever voted by a European institution, meaning reaching minus 60% of CO2 emissions reduction by 2030. So that's the kind of thing where the Parliament is clearly in its role of leading the way for climate and environmental ambition.
Now, so what is the next step now? I mean, you had a vote this week on the Common Agricultural Policy. I hope you're satisfied with that. There are other votes coming up on long-term budget. What is the next step in trying to push through the Green Deal and have the right financing to do that?
So the very first next step is, as you said, this week with the CAP, where we have to find a CAP which is clearly aligned with the Green Deal, the farm to fork strategy, the biodiversity strategy, and we all know that it's something very, very big. It's, as a reminder, it's almost 400 billions all over the period of up to 27. The next step, so that's for this week. The next step will be the recovery plan. I mean, if we invest, and it was said, I think, by Inger, if we invest wrongly the huge amount, more than 650 billion euros at the European level, in the next 3 years, if we invest them wrongly on the wrong pathway, I would say, that will be very detrimental both for climate and for biodiversity. But on the opposite, if we use this money to speed up the transition, because we would invest in the right technologies, in the right solutions, and then we would strengthen the transition, which is already happening, then that would be a game changer. So that's why we are negotiating the rules the member states will have to follow regarding the spending of this huge pot of 650 billion euros. And we try, and it's under negotiation, we try to get something as close to 10% of the total investment for biodiversity. I don't know if we're gonna manage to get that. As I have Jochen on the panel, I hope that the German presidency might, in the final run for the negotiation before the end of the year, will support that, because it would make a big difference for biodiversity in Europe, for instance. And if I might add a last word to your question, another next step, there are so many next steps because it's a huge agenda, but another next step is something that Virginijus is fully aware of, is that we want also to fight for biodiversity, which is today killed through our imports. Because, you know, the European markets, the European consumers, even if they don't intend to do, they are responsible for around 10% of the global biodiversity, because they import biodiversity loss through, for instance, buying soya beans from Amazonia, or cocoa from Africa, or rubber from Indonesia, or palm oil, that had contributed on the production side to deforestation. And that's something we want to stop. And we are voting this week, actually today in the Parliament, a legislative proposal, and I hope and I know that the Commission and Virginijus is very well aware and very committed to that. The very first quarter of 2021, there will be the very first ever law at the European level to stop imported deforestation to the European market.
In fact, yes, Pascal, that's one of the things that we mentioned just now with Virginijus, and so that's good to see that progress there. Inger, are you there? Can I speak to Inger? Are you still with us? You're with us for just a few more minutes. I've got you for like six minutes and change. I just wanted to ask you one quick question about getting citizens involved, and there are ways to do that. Also with movies, your brother was kind of like a Danish David Attenborough making environmental movies, environmental documentaries. How do we mobilize citizen action? And maybe you can mention something about green nudges? Can you turn on your mic? Inger, I don't hear you, Inger. Can you turn on your mic? Can you turn on your microphone?
My mic is...
Okay. Oh gosh, I wish we could hear you. Do we hear, is that something that we can fix quickly, or is that maybe something we should move on? Inger, try it one more time. I think I hear you.
It's
Try.
it's on your side.
I hear you now.
Okay.
And I only have you a few more minutes, so I'm very anxious to hear from you about getting citizens involved. And I
Work on this issue and was a filmmaker. Yes. Right. So yeah, I don't know if you can hear me or not. I haven't touched anything, so can you hear me? Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me?
It's okay.
You can't.
Yeah.
So I am going to exit because it seems.
No, don't exit. I hope you can see me, Inger.
All right.
About
Okay, thank you. So, thank you. No, I'm not exiting. I was looking for a thumbs up. Thank you. Yeah, so I think Pascal has already mentioned on a number of things. Be aware of what it is that your own footprint is. Get involved. Get involved in your schools, in your companies, and understand what you can do in your neighborhood, in your garden. What kind of products do you spray? As well? So inform yourself. Be aware of your consumer footprint. Pascal spoke very well to that, so I won't go into that. And frankly, take this issue into the voting box. It's not a left and right issue, it's a future issue. It's a next generation issue. But and be mindful and hold politicians, local as well as national, to account. And then get involved in your community in any which way that you can. I think these are the sort of things. This is not hopeless, but we need to see that movement and understand that activism can really shift. We have seen that on climate. We've seen young people take to the streets, in the classrooms, striking, whatever they're doing in activism. And they are now also the next generation's voters. And politicians better be aware that environmental concerns are very real in this next generation who are about to step into the voting booth. And they are aware of what my generation has done to planet Earth. So I think it's that. Plus, of course, being mindful of, as you mentioned, green nudges. There's a lot we can do with respect to green nudges, ensuring that we put up the right amount of information, that it is easier to deal with recycling, for example, that waste bins are separated, that so that people can take action, that plates are smaller in the cafeteria so that we don't have food waste, or at home at the dinner table. All of these things are the kind of things that we can do. We are wasting our resources. We are spending in the wealthier countries much more than we should. We are becoming obese. We are having health issues. We're throwing away so much food. Meanwhile, there are millions of people, 800 million to be exact, that go to bed hungry every day. So be mindful of our own footprint and be mindful of equity, because there is that other half, and they aspire to and have just as much right as you and I to live a decent life with decent job, with the kind of expectations that we have. So that's it. You gave me 2 minutes. I think I've done that. But I do want to express my deep thanks to Jochen and to Pascal for what they do, and of course to Commissioner, because I think that in Europe we really have a movement, and we at UNEP are very optimistic when we see the Green Deal, because it's setting a standard. As we head to Kunming, that standard is one that is a great bar, and we hope that other countries will reach to the same, or even further, who knows, to ensure that we can in fact have an ambitious agreement that, as Jochen said, can be implemented within all of society. Let me stop here, and I'm very sorry to step out, but I thank you very much for the invitation.
Inger, thank you very much, and you've got a big job ahead with Kunming next year with the Biodiversity Summit. So all the best to you. Thank you for joining us and giving us that aspect. Now, I'd like to get to the questions, and maybe I'll shoot this one over to Virginijus. Rafael Weyland is saying crunch time for Kunming started with ambitious EU biodiversity from the Commission. Member states already are struggling in committing to implement the targets. And he goes on, it's quite lengthy, but at the end he says, the sort of the devil's advocate question, what is the added value from Kunming? And I guess he means a biodiversity treaty, agreement, if for the next 7 years we continue to destroy the EU's nature. So I think what he's saying is, how much do we have to lose if we don't proceed with an agreement and get on the road to a climate neutrality by mid-century?
I would probably start by saying that I'm truly proud that EU is ambitious and yet is moving towards, of course, achieving those targets. And most member states are on board, and tomorrow we most likely will reconfirm it in Luxembourg in meeting in Environmental Council organized by the German presidency. But here the thing is that we live not in a vacuum, and we can't expect, on our own to achieve those goals and hope that we save the planet. We need everyone else on board. And even so, it is a difficult, it is a huge transition which might not have been seen such a big transition before. We need everyone else on board. And that's why Kunming, first of all, the value is getting everyone on board, getting China, Russia, India, United States, and so on, so that those targets, which are now EU targets, would be global targets that would be shared, monitored, and of course achieved by everyone.
Okay, let's go to our final speaker, who has now joined us, Marietta Jager, Deputy Director General of DG DevCo. Marietta, welcome. How can global biodiversity action remain in focus when partner countries are addressing the COVID-19 pandemic? We're distracted, aren't we?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I'm stepping in for my commissioner, and she apologizes not to be able to be with us. Yes, as you said, we are in an unprecedented situation, and we have learned really the hard way what happens when the misuse of the environment and biodiversity hurts the human health. And there is only one answer. There is a global solidarity and close cooperation that we need to build against the COVID-19 pandemic, but it needs to go hand in hand with biodiversity, because the fight biodiversity is part of the response. And that's why it's very important that the Nature Pledge and the summit that we have seen in New York last month build a huge political momentum for the biodiversity. And I can tell you that from the development perspective, development policy, international partnership, this is a priority for us. It's a priority part of the Green Deal, and we are really happy to see that as a part of the programming, our Team Europe approach that was basically established during the pandemic, and we collected basically pulling up together sources from member states and from us, 37 billion in terms of economic and social consequences of the pandemic. But now we have a new initiatives for the next financial perspective, and I can tell you proudly that in almost all initiatives for Team Europe, the part of the Green Deal has a huge predominant part of the biodiversity. And that is something that it's extremely important, because sustainable development approach is one that reflects the social and economic importance of biodiversity and how to benefit to other areas as well. And that means also that we need to apply it not only at the political level, but at all levels, meaning helping our partner countries that manage those public goods for our own future as well. But what is extremely important is that our partner countries need to cooperate, and of course that is only possible when we take into account also the needs of their people, because we are fighting poverty and inequality here, and therefore I can share with you many successful stories we have seen already from Virunga Park, from Eastern DRC, when we have put together the conservation and sustainable agriculture and fisheries for the job creations, and also in Latin America, supporting Colombian national and local authorities in the value chain of agriculture. But the point is, what I'm trying to say is that biodiversity is part of the future, because we need to build back better and we need to build back green, because this is something that is very important for our partner countries as well.
Marietta, can you hear me? Can you hear
Sorry.
So
Yes, I do.
It's great you've got these projects, but how difficult is that to get these developing countries on board? It involves investment. How do you go about that, getting your partner countries to make the investments you needed to work for biodiversity?
Yes, sometimes I would say it's difficult, because of course we need our partner countries really to put together their national biodiversity plan and to put the investment, I would say, priorities on the biodiversity. But how we are doing our programming now, it's really important that we are explaining to our partner countries, for example, that social economic consequences of the pandemic, for example, if we take the drop down of the revenues in tourism, in, for example, safaris in Kenya.
Oh, can we restore that connection? Is that possible? Or should we continue here? All right. Shall I move on to a viewer question? Which I think I will do that at this point, unless we get Marietta back. Let's stay on the questions. Here's one from Christina Lilistik. It is also complex. How to narrow it down to make it comprehensible, accessible to all people? It all seems too complex to inspire to act and see a clear role for citizens, all of them, not just NGOs and activists. If people are on board, politicians and member states are on board. Otherwise, all Commission proposals are watered down. Virginijus said that is an aspect where you do need, you can make all kinds of rules and declarations and strategies, but you got to have the public on board and communicating it in terms that they will, that will motivate them, right?
Absolutely. So I think this is the key probably here is the public engagement and public understanding. And how to narrow it down? I don't think so. It's possible to narrow down such a question as you know, biodiversity, which is, as I said, it is horizontal. Nature touches upon many of the areas. Half of our GDP depends on nature.
So it's their jobs,
but
it's their
here,
lives, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. But here comes the probably best part, that everyone can find their own angle, from a very simple personal engagement, personal touch to nature, which we all admire in one or the other setting, a quiet walk in the woods, or a swim in the sea, or up to exactly what you have mentioned, way bigger things like the jobs, like a community, and so on. So if you look at very simple practical examples, for example, let's take a Baltic Sea. Due to eutrophication, there is way less oxygen in the sea, and that of course affects fish, particularly cod.
Right.
So the cod stocks is almost collapse in the Baltic Sea. And the next thing you know, that this programs the social and economic problems for the coastal communities, for the fishermen and women who live around the coast of the Baltic Sea, who used to fish, and now they have lost their catch. They have basically no job, no income, and then you are forced already to solve the social and economic problems.
Right.
So there is many angles to find your engagement. I think what's most important is, of course, to really realize that the questions we are speaking here today about is not really that narrow environment conservation question. No, it's a much broader context where everyone can find their role and engagement. And of course, raising awareness, mobilizing society is a key tool, because only when society keeps the pressure on, the politicians react and move very quickly.
Yes, and I think this is, it's the way we live, the way we work, the way we eat. That should be enough, I think, if that can be communicated in simple enough terms. But also they need that information. And not everybody goes to this wealth of information that the EU provides.
Correct.
But if it's labeled on the things they buy, for instance.
This is what Pascal mentioned about the frustration, and people must know if by purchasing one or the other product, do they contribute to deforestation in Amazonia?
Yeah.
And I think this is important, and this is what the European citizens want to know.
Yeah. Jochen, you're with us back again, right? You can hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I think while Marietta was speaking, some technical problems came up, and then Pascal was also out. So I'm back again, yeah.
Okay, good. Here's another question from Sebuan Bliss. There has been significant emphasis on the instrumental value of biodiversity to us, such as in terms of economic benefit. Should we pay more attention to its intrinsic value and pave the way for normative change, such as respect for nature, regardless of its use to us? But no, I think we need to attach some kind of cost and benefit, don't we, to give the so what for the public and the policymakers to take action, and private sector. Or what do you think?
Yes, I mean, that's a very important question, and there are many reasons why we should protect our biodiversity. And respect for nature and the value of biodiversity in itself is, of course, from the ethical point of view, number one choice. But I spoke at the beginning of our conversation about our CBD presidency 10 years ago, and what we did at that time is how to address those who don't share this ethical view, how to reach out to decision makers in politics, in enterprises, to get them on board as well. And we launched the nowadays well-known study, The Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity, under the economist Pavan Sukhdev, and he found out that the value of biodiversity only in protected areas counts as much at that time, 10 years ago, as the whole world car industry, IT industry, and concrete industry. So I mean, this shows that it's not something, biodiversity is not something nice to have. It's essential. If we lose it, we will attack our economies.
But biodiversity, a few decades ago was considered some sort of scientific discussion, or maybe the environmentalist activists would be involved. In fact, you were a member of Nature and Biodiversity Conservation Union, NABU, since 1979. You were also a part of the Naturschutzjugend, German Association for Protection of Nature, right? And back then, that was the case, wasn't it? How do you feel finally that this is now the mainstream is paying attention to this? That at least gives you hope, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I really, also in my dreams, I could not imagine that in 2020 we have such a broad understanding how much we have to care about our environment, and the Green Deal is something wonderful, and also the whole engagement of the Commission, Virginijus. We are really very, very happy with what you are doing, and also the young people now that they are on the streets back. they have disappeared for quite a time now. They are there again. They take care about their future. They are reminding their parents that we are discussing about their future, and that's very relevant. And I hope with this support we can do some more good things.
Pascal Confin, are we connected with Pascal? I have a question from one of the viewers for Pascal. Do you hear me, Pascal? Over at the Parliament. I guess not. We'll have to try to reconnect with him. But maybe I can ask Jochen and Virginijus. Now, we know that the Parliament declared an environmental, a climate emergency. But what about the biodiversity? Vasco Costa asks, shouldn't the Parliament also declare a biodiversity crisis, as it has done for climate? What do you think, Virginijus?
Probably most important to understand that climate change and biodiversity loss are just the same coin, basically. It can't be solved one without another. We can't expect to stop the climate change without halting the biodiversity loss and having healthy ecosystems. Because healthy ecosystems means a huge absorption of CO2. It means, basically basins of CO2 absorbed, and that can bring a terrific result. Only by having ecosystems in place we can expect stopping climate change. So I think overall, if you look at the Green Deal, it is sort of about climate change, but then if you break it into pieces, there is over 50 grand strategies under the Green Deal, and the key core of them is, of course, biodiversity strategy and farm to fork, among, of course, others. So you cannot separate them and expect to reach one without reaching the other.
So it's simply reaffirming what they already voted for, that this was a climate, this is an environmental emergency. What about from Noah Steinau, who says, will all EU investments align with the EU sustainable investment taxonomy principles as conditions or strings for all public investment, including general budget? I think that should be a question to the EU, but also on a national level. What do you think, Virginijus?
So one of the main things which is new, probably speaking, about the next generation EU and so on, is do no significant harm principle, which has to be upheld, which is going to be strictly monitored, so that the member states, as the person who asked the question pointing out, that we wouldn't be funding, activities which actually drives the climate change or biodiversity loss, and so that we would, work it and do it very much in line with our major trajectory. And the Council itself, European Council, actually, when it tasked the Commission to prepare a landing zone for a budget, they said that the double twin trajectory which has to be upheld is actually digital and green.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Jochen, are you still with us? Hello, Jochen. Do we still have Jochen?
It seems to be weak. It collapsed just before, but I heard you, and yes, number one is I couldn't agree more with Virginijus on the sentence that climate and fighting climate mitigation or climate mitigation and biodiversity protection have to go hand in hand. Otherwise, it will not be solvable. And of course, it is very much linked also to the way how we are organizing our trade, and what's happening at the moment. And the Amazon is, of course, nationally forced, also with an inappropriate action by the Brazilian government. But of course, we are in Europe also a driver with all the imports of proteins from over there. That's number one. The second question you asked to me is whether our investments are in line with the taxonomy. Right. First of all, I'm very happy that we have the progress on the taxonomy. It's absolutely essential. And we are inlining stepwise our investments and our spendings in line with these taxonomy requirements, but I have to say we are not there. I think none of the member states and also the European level are there, but we are going into the right direction. I think in a couple of years it will be very normal to have a look in taxonomy whenever we go for public investment and spending.
So we have less than let's see, we have about 11 minutes to go. And I have a whole lot of questions from a lot of people here, but here's one. Julia Costa Domingo asks, Europe has a great impact on biodiversity outside its borders. Will consumption-based impacts on diversity be included in biodiversity targets? Can you answer that, Virginijus? Will consumption-based impacts on biodiversity be included in biodiversity targets?
The most important that what Pascal mentioned and what the Parliament today, I think, was final voting on deforestation. Exactly that with our consumption here with EU, we wouldn't be responsible, or we wouldn't be drivers of biodiversity loss outside the EU. Outside the EU, I mean Africa, especially what concerns cacao. When we speak the Amazon forest, which are cut, or forests in Paraguay, which are cut and then used for agricultural activities, from which products are usually imported to the European Union.
That's right.
So this is, I think, the very important angle, which is, of course, taken under account in the biodiversity strategy, and which EU, and especially I feel a huge support in the Parliament. I just yesterday participated in debate on that in the European Parliament, a huge support and engagement, and most importantly that most of the political groups are actually agreeing on that. There is bits and differences which maybe differ among the groups, but general support and understanding is there, and I think this is an important element for reaching a viable progress.
Hashtag EU Green Week, hashtag EU Green Deal. It's good to mention these things because, as you said, there are these critical votes coming up. And to what degree does this Green Week hopefully strengthen the hand of those who would like to make the Green Deal a reality and to have the legislation and the actions you need to achieve that? How much does this Green Week help you?
First of all, I think the Green Week and its purpose is to engage with society, to let them know, and maybe for some people it's new, for some they've been following this for a long time, but really get them acquainted with the initiatives and with the way EU is going. I think this year been a good year speaking about the initiatives, about the ambition, about setting an ambitious goals. Next year we should be, doing utmost on delivery, and for this reason I think the Green Week is important to keep the society engaged, for society to know what's happening, to follow the progress, ask for results, return, and so on.
How do we ensure that this Green Deal is going to create the jobs we need?
First of all, Green Deal has to be taken as a growth strategy, because when we speak about the transition, we realize very well that it has to be inclusive in order for society to accept it, for society to support it. And if you look at many of those initiatives, they are actually about the job creation. Just recently adopted renovation wave speaks about almost 200,000 additional jobs created in greening our buildings, in greening our infrastructure. And when you look at the other initiatives, for example, the biodiversity strategy, we see the untapped potential of nature-based solutions, which can be definitely implemented. And most importantly, that this is about innovative jobs, about the well-paid jobs, about the jobs with the high added value, and resilient to future shocks.
How, as economy minister in Lithuania, how much were you able to direct the policy in a green direction?
One of the major things was, of course, directing the EU funding into green direction, in direction that not really increases the amounts of CO2, but decreases them. That the investments from the EU would go into green direction, and that the companies who enter the Lithuanian market, of course, would uphold certain sustainability standards. And I'm happy to see that things which we were talking about, they getting institutionalized. When we speak about the sustainability standards, they becoming a norm, they becoming a legislation, which is, of course, makes them easier for everyone to follow.
So, some final remarks before we wrap it up. I guess this was a success in bringing all parties to the table, this virtual table, in talking about how we make this Green Deal action, put it into action. During this Green Week, these discussions, these dozens of different panels, that does sort of strengthen, build the momentum, doesn't it?
I am absolutely thankful to everyone who organized, who gave so much time and who made it happen in this uneasy time. It still hurts to know, I know how much people really wanted to make it live, to bring everyone by the real tables and have a real engaging discussions. But I think people did a terrific job in making it happen online. And of course, online is always a good option also because it's open for everyone around the globe. As long as you have access to internet, you can be sitting here, even so we can't see you, but I can reassure you that we feel your support.
So with this global reach, what one message should we transmit in these last moments?
Probably my takeaway is very simple. We talked a lot, we pointed out and underlined major challenges, but we can't just talk about, protecting and restoring, about the challenges. It's too late for that. Now it's time for action. And I think the major takeaway is, of course, that we need to step up action which, increase protection and restores ecosystems back to healthy.
We really need to make this a new beginning. This is how we do it, right?
No, absolutely. We're not starting from the status quo. The science progressed, the society matured, and we have a unique political opportunity window which we cannot waste.
And all these stories that we heard these last 3 days were quite inspiring, weren't they?
Absolutely, especially meeting young people, knowing how much they know, knowing how deeply it affects them, and that they have, huge expectations.
How much is this youth quake that we've seen across the world on the environment, Greta Thunberg and company, how much does that strengthen your hand?
I would say overall, I believe that without, not only, of course, young people were during those Fridays for Future protests, they were different age of people who truly care about this planet. And I think thanks to those people, we have a political willingness to act. We have an agreement among most of the political groups, and we have a Green Deal.
Can we mention these Life Awards? It was quite inspiring. Managing brown bear populations in the Alps, alternative fruit and veg market, reducing waste in Portugal, forest fire prevention in Hungary, improve air quality for 23 million Italians in the Po Valley. These were concrete things that have happened. And if we can multiply those 1,000 points of light.
This is perfect examples to your answer, to your question, about the jobs. Can it be created? Look at this untapped potential of solutions, which I think many of us didn't really knew about, and I was so fascinated about. There were, I think, around 70 projects in total, and I truly don't envy the Commission who had to decide who are the winners, because you could have in one category only one winner. and there were like 6-7 great projects which not only creating jobs but really offers a sustainable solutions which are extremely innovative, attractive, and so on. But I'm thankful to all of them. I hope they will be keep on working, because it's not in the end of the day about that award. It's that their work truly contributes to what's most important, saving this planet, not only for us or our children, but also for their children and future generations.
Virginijus, we're a minute away. What about next year? Is it going to be virtual? Green Week, when does that happen?
No,
May 31st, is that it?
I hope it's going to be live, and we will be able to cheer everyone and engage with everyone. But of course, we are going to learn from this amazing organization this year, making it virtually, so that even if it's live, we will make it accessible to the broader world, so that they could also join, engage, and maybe ask questions.
And we managed to shrink the carbon footprint on the event too, didn't we? This is so from May 31st to June 4th next year, dedicated to zero pollution ambition.
That's going to be another big thing next year. We started with our chemical strategy, but keep following us. We have so much more on the plate to deliver.
Virginijus, Sinkevičius, thank you so much. Thank you for giving that opportunity for so many people to express themselves these last 3 days. As Environment Commissioner, it must be quite fulfilling to see that. Thanks to everyone and to all the people behind the scenes to make this happen. It was a huge effort, a big event, and I would like to leave you with, of course, we're going on to the Biodiversity Summit next year, and hopefully this is a kind of a rallying cry for that. But let me leave you with one final thought. And perhaps a number of you have seen this new David Attenborough film, A Life on Our Planet. And David Attenborough, let me read a passage from him, who says, "The truth is, the natural world is changing, and we are totally dependent on that world. It provides our food, water, and air. It is the most precious thing that we have, and we need to defend it." Thanks for joining us. Thank you.